Okay, so up to this point, we have discussed the basic origins of Greek drama. We've discussed the different types of Greek drama. Remember, we have tragedy and the three styles of comedy: satyr, old comedy, and new comedy. And now what we want to do is familiarize ourselves with some of the more prominent Greek playwrights. So when I say some of, what I'm actually meaning are the ones that we know about. As stated, so much of what we know about Greek theater is based on the work of just a few surviving playwrights. Everyone else's work has been lost to time and history. So while surely there were dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of active playwrights during ancient Greece, and especially during the time of the city Dionysus, only a few of their works have survived, and so these are the ones that we use as the basis of our knowledge of Greek theater. So out of all of those playwrights, there are only four that we really need to understand who they were and what they contributed to the development of theater during these early days. So here in this video, we're going to focus on the first one of them, a gentleman named Aeschylus. So one of the first things I want to make sure that you all are aware of is that very first statement there at the very top of the slide. You'll see there it says that Aeschylus is considered the father of Greek drama and therefore all of Western drama. That is incredibly important, so please make sure in your notes you star that, you underline it, make sure you have it somewhere, because if someone were to ask you on a test, wink wink, who was considered the father of Greek drama, you will know that it is Aeschylus. So why is Aeschylus considered the father of Greek drama? Well, put simply, because he invented many of the elements that made drama its own specific art form. As you see there in the second bit, first to develop drama into a separate art form from singing, dancing, or storytelling. So he was the first to really develop dramatic structure, the introduction of characters, how a play should be structured versus how a basic third-person story or a song is. All those mechanics that have been used from his time up to and including today all began with him. You'll notice there another big point. Make sure you have this starred or underlined in your notes somewhere. He added the second actor. Okay, so he added the second person, therefore allowing for true dialogue between characters. So as opposed to just Thespis out on stage talking back and forth to the chorus, he invented two separate people playing two separate characters and exchanging dialogue back and forth. I know that it doesn't sound all that exciting or revolutionary now, but again, there's no record of anything until it happens. This was pretty revolutionary for its time. He's also the founder of theatrical spectacle and is sometimes credited with having developed new forms of stage scenery, painted scenery, and elaborate costumes. We're going to talk more about the theater building and the manner of special effects that they would use a little later on, but a lot of those early elements of stage production, so not just the script itself, but how a play is formed and performed, we accredit to him, or at least he was the one that started it. We believe that he has written about 90 plays, and the titles of about 79 of them are known. However, only 7 of his plays still exist. So again, an example of how a artist's work is lost to history. Out of those 7 plays that still exist, the one that I want to make sure that you are aware of and that you attribute to Aeschylus is this one, Agamemnon. Now, we are going to talk more about Agamemnon as well as some of these other plays in class and in future videos, but for right now, just for pure facts and notes that you need to make sure you have down, make sure you have down Agamemnon by Aeschylus. The second playwright that I want you to be familiar with, and this is probably the most important one, he is the one that we usually talk about when we discuss Greek tragedy. He is to Greek tragedy as William Shakespeare is to Elizabethan tragedy, and that is Sophocles. He is considered probably the best playwright from ancient Greece, at least of the ones that we are still aware of, and his works are used as the basis of many theories and practices that helped theater evolve throughout the centuries. So basically, Sophocles took the ideas that Aeschylus had about dramatic techniques and he pushed them even further. What he's most noted for is his superior plot construction. So he really made the stories complex and multi-layered, as opposed to just a straightforward narrative. Someone we are going to talk about later, and that is the philosopher Aristotle, where don't worry about him just now, but just know that he used Sophocles' works, specifically a play we're going to talk about here in a minute, King Oedipus, as the model for his own analysis of tragedy. We will talk more about Aristotle's theories of tragedy and drama here shortly, but for right now, just know that he gets a lot of his ideas from Sophocles. Increase the tragic chorus from 12 to 15 members, and this is very important. Again, make sure you star this, underline it, do whatever you need to do, is credited with introducing the third actor. So remember, we talked about one of the major elements of Greek tragedy is that there were no more than 3 actors involved at any one time, and no more than 3 characters on stage at any one time. So he is the one that set that standard. He introduced the third actor. So again, make sure you have that starred, make sure you have that information somewhere in your notes. Now here is something a little bit new. He told stories as single dramas instead of extending them into the traditional trilogy. Now let's take a break and talk about that statement. One of the popular elements of Greek storytelling, especially in terms of drama, was the trilogy. And they referred to any trilogy as a cycle. The trilogy, it was very much like we would think of a movie trilogy now, a 3-part story, one long play basically divided into 3 parts. So what it's saying, one of the things that Sophocles did that was unique is he still wrote trilogies, he still wrote 3-part stories, but he made each story self-contained. So as opposed to thinking of the trilogy as, say, the Lord of the Rings or the Star Wars trilogy, where the 3 movies come together to make one large movie, think of them more like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where you have a movie about Captain America that can connect to the movie about Thor, that can connect to the movie about Iron Man, and all 3 taken together tell a bigger story, but they focus on individual characters and their individual stories. So Sophocles kind of originated the concept of the cinematic universe. Lastly, and once again, we see the example of plays being lost to history. He is believed to have written over 120 plays, but only 7 complete tragedies have survived. Of those 7, there are 3 that I want to make sure that you are aware of, and we are going to talk very in depth about these in class and in future videos. But right now, just for the sake of note-taking, I want to walk you through the names of the Oedipus cycle. So first up, Oedipus Rex, or also known as Oedipus the King. Now, again, we are going to talk very in-depth about the storyline, the structure, and we will see elements of a performance of this show. So this is the first one. This is considered his greatest work, and this is the one that Aristotle is going to use as the basis for his work, which we will talk about at a later date. Second, we have Oedipus at Colonists. So this is the second play in the trilogy, and it deals with Oedipus after the events of the first play, as he's cast out and wanders into a town called Colonists. We are not going to speak at length about this one. It is the least performed and the least talked about. I've only seen one production of it in my lifetime. So I'll provide reference material for you to go and check it out if you so desire. But the main thing to understand is that this play is the second of the Oedipus cycle. Third, Antigone. I know it looks like it's spelled Antigone, but it's pronounced Antigone. This is my personal favorite of the Oedipus cycle. It is the third in the series, and this one deals with Oedipus's daughter Antigone and his brother-in-law Creon, or Creon depending on the pronunciation. Again, we will discuss the plot and the ramifications of this show at length in lectures and possibly future videos, but for right now, please make sure you know Antigone by Sophocles, the third play of the Oedipus cycle. The third Greek playwright that I would like you to be familiar with is this man, Euripides. Euripides is considered to be the most modern of the three tragic playwrights, meaning that he took what we would consider to be a more enlightened view on certain dramatic elements. Listed there for you in the second bullet point, known for his sympathetic portrayal of women. It was not uncommon to have female characters as your lead. We see that with Sophocles' Antigone. But in a play that dealt with the battle of the sexes, to have a playwright come down on the side of women over men, that was unheard of. He is known for mixing of tragedy with melodrama and comedy. Now that is a big step, because if you recall when we were talking about the types of Greek drama, one of the things that defines Greek drama is that they keep the genres separate. Comedy and tragedy should never mix, and that's something that's going to come back to us a little later on when we're discussing the neoclassics and whatnot. But the idea was that if you had something funny happen in your tragedy, it would cheapen the message. And conversely, who wants to see something sad in a comedy? They wanted those two genres very separate, but he mixed elements of comedy into his tragedies. He's also known for his skeptical treatment of the gods. Now, the Greeks had a different look at their gods than we do of ours in modern times, and the belief that their gods were fallible, and their gods were basically very much like them, just with more power. But you still had to worship them, you still believed they were right in most instances because they were the gods. Euripides' plays took a very different stance on that and said, no, just because they're gods doesn't make them right. As much as anybody could back then, his characters behaved as people did in everyday life. And as such, he had more realism in his plays than either of his compatriots. Controversial because of his plots, he diminished the use of the chorus and their sensational subject matter, most of all for his portrayal of the gods as human and fallible. 18 of his plays still exist. The only play of his that I want you to remember for our purposes is this one. That is Medea. So please make sure you have this in your notes. Medea by Euripides. Now again, we will speak at length about what the story of Medea is in class, as well as probably in future videos. But just for the cold hard facts, just the notes that you need to take and the things that you need to know, please know Medea. The final playwright that I would like you to be familiar with from the Greek Golden Age is this man, Aristophanes. Now, whereas the other playwrights we have discussed have all been tragic playwrights, Aristophanes is the best known comic playwright of that time period. His plays reflect the social and political climate in Athens as it declined in power towards the end of the 5th century. And we're going to see that as we examine one of his more popular works. What's really important is you take a look at that third bullet point there. It says his plays were full of bawdy wit. Remember back when we were first talking about the different types of Greek drama, and one of the things I mentioned was that the Greeks liked their tragedies very bloody, and we're going to see examples of that as we discuss the plots of things like Oedipus, Antigone, and Medea, and they liked their comedy very dirty, full of what we would call college humor, or toilet humor, I guess, for the time. But his plays were very rude, a lot of sex jokes and things of that nature. Of his most famous works, the one I would like you to remember for testing purposes is this one, Lysistrata. Now, Lysistrata is kind of the gold standard for Greek comedies and what we understand about them. And it is full of everything I was just talking about. Very dirty humor. The premise itself is very risque. We will talk about it, but we're not going to worry about that here. For right now, just make sure you have this in your notes. Lysistrata by Aristophanes. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked a lot about these playwrights. We've talked a lot about the facts of them, and you've gotten the names of some of their most important works. Now, I know I've said this 100 times throughout this video. I repeat myself. You're just going to have to get used to that. We are going to talk in much, much, much more detail about some of these plays. We are going to discuss Oedipus. We are going to discuss Antigone, we are going to discuss Medea, and we are going to discuss Lysistrata. Remember what I said at the very beginning, very first video. The study of theater is the study of culture. And by examining these 4 plays specifically, we will begin to understand how the mindset of the ancient Greeks kind of worked. So we are going to look at those plays, their plots, their themes, in much more detail when we meet in class. I'm planning some additional videos explaining the plots of those plays. The purpose of these videos is just to give you the cold, hard, note-taken facts. So we don't have to take the time in class to worry about it. You can watch these on your own and get the information. I am also going to try to provide additional resources in the description for these plays, so please take a look at those if you have the time. So, we will discuss these plays in greater detail, but for right now, please, please, please make sure that you are just aware of these 4 playwrights. And once again, that is Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes. And make sure you know the plays that I suggested to you or that I pointed out to you. And we will talk about those more in detail when next we meet.